So today we have the last seminar held by the Professor Nicholls and on the urban agroecology, the application of agroecology to the rural development in Latin America and agroecology in the context of COVID-19, Russian-Ukraine conflict, and economic inflation. So, Clara, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. I'm glad that we're at the end of this seminar. I know there has been a lot of information. Probably you will need time to digest this. But the presentation are going to be in the website, right? So you can read with a lot of time and reflect about all these topics. And if you need any help, let me know through it, and I can answer some of the questions that you have in future morning. So I organized today the 3 talks different way that is in the program, because at the beginning I want to talk about agroecology and the reconstruction of post-COVID agriculture, especially the effects that have COVID on agriculture and the food systems. Then I talk about urban agroecology, and then I will present the kind of work that we do in that and that we do very well. And so we already talked about this, but I just want to put this in context of COVID, industrial agriculture, and all the package, the associated agrochemical, genetic, and modified technology that is used in this conventional agriculture, have become the major force that modifies the biosphere. So we have 80% of the land is under 1.5 billion hectares of this kind of monoculture, very homogeneous in species and also genetically speaking. And as I mentioned, I think in one of the classes, these are very vulnerable to diseases, but also to pests and to climate change. But for a long time before the coronavirus, agroecologists have warned the industrial agriculture to be very narrow, ecologically speaking, and that we were saying that it depends a lot of inputs from outside, and they were very vulnerable. And now with COVID, this industrial agriculture has demonstrated that are very vulnerable to this kind of crisis, and also was one of the major causes of the COVID. I'm going to explain why. But the one thing that we can say is that COVID-19 has revealed how closely human, animal, and ecological care are. So everything is interconnected. So crop monoculture, that because we need to increase the size, so create a lot of deforestation, and also animal production, which in this particular case raises genetically similar domestic animals. So many have been creating the conditions to spread new pathogens. And this is the industrial animal production that I'm talking about. I don't know if you have similar situation here, but in the United States, this is what the problem is all about. This industrial agriculture has created a lot of pathogens, like, for example, H5N1, Asian avian influenza. That was very dramatic problem. H5N2, multiple swine flu variants, Ebola, Campylobacter, hepatitis E, Salmonella, so many. And now, for example, in the United States, people are very concerned about avian flu, because avian flu, we thought that just for chicken, but now it's moving into the animals and creating probably a lot of problems. The other thing that is in this particular CAFO that we call confined agricultural systems, the practice operation is mainly using animals that are very genetically similar, and they are very susceptible to viral infections. So it sponsors the condition with other pathogens to develop. Okay. And when they are using antibiotics, I think I mentioned this the first class, the situation is worse. Why? Because there are many pathogens that develop resistance, and this is passed to humans. And when humans have diseases, the antibiotics don't work. So it is estimated that 23,000 persons in the United States died of antibiotic-resistant infection each year. And this has and the annual cost of this infection is still $20 billion. So it's like a treadmill that never ends. So it started with a pathogen, the animal production, and they use antibiotic, moves to people, and this has a consequence on public health. And the other thing is, I just want to take your attention on the massive global growth in meat and milk production, at least in the United States, is huge. And the other thing is that there are animals that are fed with grains, especially soy and maize. And look, the animal feed, the soy, the word soy production is not used for food. It's used to feed animals or to feed cars. So 77% of the animal feed, the soybean goes to feed poultry, pigs, and other animals, okay? And for direct human food, it's only 20%, I can say, and for industry, 3.8. But look, from direct human is mainly for oil and other soy milk or tofu that is very small. And most of this soy is transgenic soybean that has other consequences. And this is the case of South America. The large scale of monoculture advanced at the expense of natural height. So a lot of deforestation is associated with this model of agriculture. And only the soybean production in South America covers over 57 million hectares. So you can imagine the portion. The landscapes, especially in Argentina, Brazil, Bolivia, that most of the landscape are responding to the need of the north, but at the same time causing a lot of problems. Here is the problem. You need to increase in area, so you need to cut the forest. Deforestation trigger process, because, for example, in this forest, you have probably a community that kept the virus in place. So the virus can be with the bats or with different animals, wild animals. But when you cut the forest, this virus, move into the soil and the soil and our animals that create these kind of problems. This is one of the hypotheses of COVID-19. So if we need to think about what has been the influence or the impacts of COVID on the food system, there are two ways. One way is the impact on the food system because it affecting food production, land use system, and they also affected, so the food system that is impacted consumer. You remember that during the pandemic it was very difficult to find food, and even many large industries, they closed, they couldn't have workers. So influence also directly on trading, processing, and distribution system. Many people lost their jobs because all these factories were closed. And so this is one way how it affects, and impacts of mainly food system. Create this industrial agriculture is creating one of the problems because deforestation, but also animal production, impacts of trading and processing, because the kind of food that we are eating, and also the immune system of the people that probably is lower. So when the people have lower immune system, they are more susceptible to this kind of COVID. Many people were talking about susceptible people like high pressure, or they have diabetes, or they have certain kind of diseases that these people were more vulnerable to climate change. And I think I mentioned that the diet, at least in the United States, is based on corn. And this diet creates many health problems like sugar or diabetes or high blood pressure or different obesity. And these people were very susceptible to COVID. So everything is connected to what happened. So impacts on and impacts of COVID. And here, for example, you can see the level. So we can have food production and land use system, and they have effects of COVID, for example, restricted access to inputs and output markets. So big companies couldn't use input because there was no this kind of trade, and also on the markets, and also reduce the incentives to produce. So they were not producing anything because the situation was they were closed. The other thing is they took the great attention to pay to the rural areas as places to live. So many people wanted to move to the countryside because the situation with COVID, people were confined in the city, so they wanted to be outside. And the effects of COVID, so as I said before, disruption on the ecological infrastructure of the agroecosystems, and confinement of animals exacerbating the chance of zoonotic disease. Animal production in cattle, or the condition for creating more zoonotic diseases. And another level could be the trading and processing and distribution systems. So the restricted mobility affect the access to input and output, as I mentioned. No pesticide that they couldn't buy, or fertilizers. So everything more or less collapsed in that regard. And risk aversion by farmers, workers, traders, limited market, food processing and distribution activities were like stopped mainly. High vulnerability of countries or regions that depend on food imports, countries that, like in Europe, that you import some food in certain time of the year, and also high vulnerability of countries or regions that depend on export. So we couldn't export, all the ports were closed, so it created a huge problem. Higher demand for home delivery food, so it created new markets with WhatsApp, or the people that made more money during the pandemic. You know who was the company that made more money? Yes, Amazon. So they were very, very happy with this situation because now everybody, before we never used this kind of delivery for food. So you used to go to the supermarket or to the farmer market. But now people, after the pandemic, they continue demanding this kind of service. So the revenues for this big company was kind of very high. Anyway, so from the trading, processing, and distribution system, the effects of COVID was the codependence and high global connectivity facilities that fast spread the disease, as I mentioned before. The whole cell distribution facilitating the spread of disease at national level also was very important. And let's talk about the entire food system, because I think this is the most important one, and try to combine both of them. So less demand for food due to the less income. So people were poor. So it was kind of create a circle of poverty because most of the farm workers were displaced because of COVID. At the end, they didn't have income to buy any food, so create other problems. So it was effects on the informal sector, and the price of the food went up. So higher food prices were also very difficult for poor people to get the food. Less demand due to closing of entertainment, gastronomic, and tourism sector. So now we don't have restaurants, so the prices went up, and many people lost their business. Interruption or disruption of food aid system and school meals. At least in Latin America, many kids that depend on the meals that they receive in school. And when the school closed, the impact on this community was very high, especially with poor kids. And increase awareness on solidarity and solidarity economies. Despite all these problems, it was a global activities on solidarity activities with the more disadvantaged. And I'm going to show one example from Brazil that is very, very nice. And the effects were the consumption of highly processed and uniform diets year-round, leading to reduced immunity. So as I said, many people are used to eat that kind of food, create a lot of vulnerability with the diseases that they have. And also because we used to have the supermarket with all this kind of food and no anymore. So clearly, COVID has revealed the socio-ecological fragility of the current industrialized and globalized food system, because we depend on food that is coming from overseas. And also we thought that, I think nobody thought that COVID was affecting or we are going to have a pandemic. And this shows us how fragile our systems are. The effects of pandemic on food supply chain with spread food storage and prices spikes. So the food prices started to increase dramatically. Diet changes, migrant workers' welfare, they lost their jobs. School children access to lunches was not possible for them to get the meals that they used to have. And small farmers' viability. And we are going to see that the people that really were our heroes were the farmers small farmers that were in the field producing some food for the local people. As you can see here, and we have a paper, if you want to read this particular paper on agroecology, this graph is in our paper that explains all this aspect. So you can see that there are a need for design and manage this industrial agriculture. The conversion is so essential and needed. So we need to think in alternative animal production. We need to restore our landscape matrix because we need to come back and break the monoculture, huge monoculture, creating the problem. Focus our attention in rural and urban diversified production system, and this is the reason why I'm going to talk about urban agroecology. And also we can talk about how we already talked about ecological management of pests and diseases. And there are different ways how we can do this in order to have better livelihood, local food sovereignty, and greater ecological integrity. Our main goal is to have environmental and human health, because everything is interconnected. So agroecology can address several crises, as I showed the first day, but we need to focus our attention in the food system. So if the industrial food system was the problem, so why don't we concentrate in the local foods? How we are going to do this transformation of the induction into the local food systems. And the way to do it is through these 4 different approaches: enriching nature metrics, revitalizing small farms, alternate animal production system, and enhancing urban agriculture. Okay, these are the 4 main strategies that we think with agroecology we can do it. So the first, in enriching the landscape matrix. So the idea is to have a landscape that is complex, and probably they have fragments of forests separated with variety of small farms that can play a very important role. In these environments, we are going to have rich in biodiversity. We are going to promote environmental services or ecosystem services for agriculture, like biological control, pollination, organic matter decomposition. But at the same time, in these forests, there is a coexistence with wildlife species that are very important to contain the virus. And what we're saying is that these ecological matrices create ecological farm rates, so they contain the virus and help to avoid the release of this virus into the animals and then to humans. So this is the idea, and I showed this one last time that we were thinking in the indicators. So we need to move from this kind of landscape into create this landscape through agroecological restoration. So we need to think in the high scale, not just the farm. So we need to move from this kind of landscape into this kind of landscape. Okay, with all the approach that we have been saying during this week. So this is a typical landscape of traditional farming system. This is in Guatemala. And you can see that it's a mosaic of the small farms surrounded by forests. And here is because there is a traditional knowledge, and the indigenous people kept the forest because they say that it's a sponge. So they were drinking water. But if you see this as a strategy for containing virus, makes sense to maintain the forest. Okay, because otherwise they can have other problems. So these forests play a lot of services, I can say, or ecosystem services. Water, for example, for them is so important, but also if we talk about pests, they also have beneficial insects that are going to move. If we think about pandemics, they are going to contain the virus over there with the wildlife, and also they are going to have the habitat for beneficiaries. This is just one example. This picture we were discussing with Professor David. This picture was in the 80s. Miguel did this research in Tlaxcala, in Mexico, where farmers have this system, a small piece of land surrounding with forests, and they use the forest. So this is very important. For example, in the field, this small field, in 1 hectare, they have 11 crops. They have maize, beans, fava, squash. So they produce 6 tons of these crops. They also have weeds. We call weeds, but they call leaves because they eat those weeds. So it's part of the diet. So they produce 13 tons, and each family consumes 3 kilos 2 or 3 times a week in part of the diet of the main dishes. And in the border, they have fruits, 8 different species. They produce 0.64 tons. And when you add all these, more or less what we were discussing with the layer, the income per hectare per year is $1,800. And 600 of this comes from the border. So the border has an ecological role and also an economic role when they use the forest. Okay, the other aspect that we were saying is so important in terms of how we are going to reconstruct the agriculture is give the opportunity to peasant agriculture because they are the ones who are feeding us. and we call revitalizing peasant agriculture. Many evidence show that agroecology restore the production capacity of a small scale farming because the total out they produce a lot. And also, if they use the practices they have traditional practice, but they use agroecological practice. This is the reason why we say that agroecology is like a very short knowledge. They can improve the use. Okay. And also they can conserve agrobiodiversity and the positive effect that we already saw in terms of food security and environmental integrity. So this is the starting point, the traditional knowledge, but they need support because during the pandemic, unfortunately, many governments took a policy to give food to the local people, especially poor people. In my country, the president decided to import food rather than buy the food from the local farm, from the small farmers. It was kind of a very sad story, but it was the situation. Because it was a business also, a lot of corruption to bring food from outside and distribute using this food as a political popularity, but at the same time, these farmers that make a lot of effort to produce were ignored by many governments, still very ignored. And why these peasants are so important? Because they have 7,000 crop species and 2,000 million of food varieties adapted to thousands of geographies. So they have the genetic material. They have traditional varieties that are very, very important. And because they are tolerant and to different conditions, different microclimatic conditions, and different ecosystems. 80 to 90% of the seeds that are in the hands of the small farmers are traditional seeds. And they are the ones who feed us. 50 to 70% of the food that we consume globally comes from these small farmers. But they use only 20 to 30% of the land, 30% of the water, 20% of the fossil fuel, and they cool the planet. Remember the last class we were discussing about the kind of agriculture that is causing climate change, industrial agriculture. And the kind of agriculture that is cooling the planet is this agriculture. So for that reason, it is very important to demonstrate, doing research, demonstrating that a small farm can be very productive. And this is what we call the lighthouses. So places where this is an NGO that have a demonstration plant. And we did a lot of research on this. This is in Chile. This is half an hectare. In half an hectare, you can produce a lot. This is the productivity. They have a rotation that produces 3 tons of products. They have a home garden that produces 1.12 tons. They're surrounded with trees. This half an hectare, the surrounding is with fruit trees that produce 8.8 tons. They have 1 cow that produces 3,200 liters of milk. They have chicken that produce 2,500 eggs, and they have bees that produce 57 kilos of honey. So a family of 5 don't need all this. Okay, so they can sell. The commercial value is $2,000. The production cost is $700. So the income that the family can receive is $1,600. So this is above the poverty line. So it's very important. So they can have free time to work in other places. But the nutritional inputs is the most important thing. So protein, calories, vitamins. So the percentage of nutrients after meeting the family food needs is very high. So you can take the people out of poverty with an agroecological design that demonstrate. This is very important for politicians to see that in half an acre, people can feed the family on farm, but at the same time have a surplus. So, and this is one of the strategy. And in terms of animal production, I mentioned the other day the alternative instead of having cows. There is this strategy of silvopastoral system that combine fodder plants such as grasses and legumes with herbs and trees for animal nutrition and other uses. In this particular farm, they use very rare antibiotics because the animals are very healthy, and the diet is based on plants rather than grain. And the other thing, they produce less methane. That is one of the main gases. And also, the idea with this diet is to strengthen the immune system of the animals. So you don't need the antibiotic. Okay, this is an ecological restoration farm that we are going to see later in my other presentation, but I just want to take your attention that this is a silvopastoral system. It's very difficult to see the animals. I don't know if you see here a black dot. These are the animals. So it is possible to restore the environment, in this case, that you are conserving biodiversity. You provide the ecosystem services, and at the same time you have animal production. That is because many people blame on the animal. It's not the animal. You know, I don't know how many of you are vegetarian, but the vegetarians are totally scared about animal production. They say, no, we cannot eat meat. Okay, listen, we need to understand where the meat is coming from, what kind of system are you using to produce the meat, what kind of system, because cattle, I agree with you, if you are going to meat or meat from a cattle system, forget it, I don't want to eat it. But if you are having this kind of system that are producing milk and meat, these systems are providing ecosystem services that are very important. They are reforesting the landscape. They are providing other services. And these are the different animal production. These are in Colombia, actually, that probably is different than here. But this is, for example, from a farmer that have little land, no big farm, but they have animals. So the only way is to produce a lot of biomass and a lot of feed for the animals using Tithonia diversifolia. All these corridors are this plant, Tithonia diversifolia, that the animals like to browse. They have a lot of protein, and also these flower attract beneficial insects. They also, the foliage have a lot of phosphorus, so enhance the soil fertility and so on. This is in the western Andes of Colombia with the small farmers, and these are from the Orinoquia that are bigger farms. So it's a matter of working in the design and the rebuilding the animal production schemes. Okay, then the other strategy is optimizing urban agriculture, because during the COVID, I don't know if here, but many people started to use the balcony or using the piece of land that they have nearby or the parks, wherever. So this could be one very important approach, because the production of fruit, vegetables, egg near consumers increase the diversity, also increase the nutrition, and promote the local where we want. And in 2005, 30% of the food consumed in the world major cities came from urban agriculture, only 30% in 2005. And you're going to see how it's growing in my other presentation. The global urban production range between 100 and 180 million tons per year, according to FAO. So it's a lot of food that we can produce in the cities. So eating nutrition, plant-based food can fortify people's immune system. It's very important for our human health. And now many doctors are doing this kind of research. I want to recommend a book that is by a professor from UC San Francisco, University of California, San Francisco. She's a doctor, and now she's working with agroecology, and she has a book called Farm Ecology. So according to the kind of food that you are eating, you have certain kind of diseases, and she's doing a lot of research with kids. So kids that are fed with McDonald's and this kind of food that is very fast food, develop certain kind of diseases compared with kids that are fed by organic food. And there are certain cities like Berkeley, where I'm coming from, where it was a referendum by the parents of the kids in the school. And so this school at Berkeley, that is a small city, all the lunches come from organic food produced by farmers close by. So this also gives a very nice dynamic for farmers who have a market, but also for kids who have a healthy school. Because in other cities, they just have Pizza Hut, McDonald's, all this kind of fast food that have a lot of problems in terms of the immune system. So urban agriculture is an issue, and this is the reason why we decided with Professor Day to have a talk about what are the context of urban agriculture all over, and if we can apply the principles for agroecology, and the answer is yes. We apply the same principles. Here, for example, this is Cuba. I'm going to talk more about Cuba because they are leaders on urban agriculture. Because not only during the pandemic, but they started before with the crisis when the Soviet Union collapsed. They didn't have petroleum, so they couldn't bring the food from the countryside. So they started to develop this approach of urban agriculture. So, and also in the midst of COVID crisis, many people have urban agriculture have been bolstered as major sustainable alternative to food security on the urbanized planet. So urban production of fresh fruit, vegetables, and some animal products near consumer improve local food security, nutrition, and especially in the most poor communities. So this is a sample from Colombia, where we started a project before the pandemic with a professor. She's a peasant from the community, but she's a professor in the high school. So we started a project with her in the high school on 2019. And then the pandemic came, and it was amazing, and we have a paper on that. How many of the kids that were in school at that time started this project, this garden in their house? You know, with the knowledge that they were still in the high school. It was kind of very nice surprise. So it was kind of a boom during the pandemic. So from this topic, I can say that COVID has exposed the tragedy of animal factory farming and the endless monoculture, which led to many losses of biodiversity, but also create a lot of problems. This particular international agriculture create a lot of public health problems like obesity, malnutrition, also create a lot of food waste, and appalling working conditions for migrant laborers. So farm workers are that work in industrial agriculture, the conditions are terrible, and undermine the livelihood of the small farmers. Given this reality, agroecology is positioning itself as a key agricultural path that can provide rural families with significant socioeconomic, let's say economic, but also social benefits and also environmental. And at the same time, they can feed us. They have demonstrated that they produce 50 to 70% with food that is equitable and sustainable. So an important lesson that we have from COVID is that we need to, the need that food production be in the hands of producers, peasants, and urban farmers that wanted to produce in a different way. We need a policy to give land to those people that wanted to produce. And this is the only way to ensure the supply of fresh food, first of all, and at a good price, not only for the rich, but organic and biological production and just for the rich. And in the local markets and away from the chain, the food chain, because what happened with the pandemic and the food chain break, we are in risk. So we require providing smallholder farmers with land, seeds, water, and equitable markets, because the problem is that the small farmers don't have that. For example, the organic have the markets, but the markets for small farmers are subject to the coyote, the intermediary, that pays very little, and they are the ones who make the money. Okay? Another thing is that many people want to be farmers, but the land is so expensive that they don't have the money by the land. I don't know here, like California. I have many students that want to be farming, but it's impossible. The cost of land is so high, and the money here is the same. I don't know, probably in certain regions. So the role of consumer is so important because we need to understand, especially from the urban dwellers, that eating is also an ecological act. You want to eat organic, it's an ecological act, that is also a political act. You go to the farmer market and you know that you're a farmer and you wanted to support them. It's very different than if you go to, I don't know if you have Walmart here or big supermarkets. Hyper supermarket that you don't know where the food is coming from. They pay the farmers after 6 months when they receive the product. They are very, so this is very key. And when consumers support local farmers instead of a corporate food chain, they are creating this stability and resilience, socio-ecological sustainability and resilience. So consumers also play a very important role, because we always talk about farmers and we put all the tasks on farmers, but as a consumer, we have a role and we eat 3 times a day. So we need to have the power of decision and also the power of push for the right policy. So we need to transform, we need to shift from market economy to a solidarity economy. That is what we as a consumer, we are solidarious with the farmer. And also we need to do the transformation from fossil fuel to renewable energy. In that process of transition, we need to think on that. From big corporation to cooperatives. So last weekend, we went in a cooperative, I mentioned, El Tamito in Palma. 40 years of biological and they have the consumer. So we're 120 people in the field there, and half of them were consumers. So you can see that kind of linkages that are very strong, and we need more of that. So such new work should be led by allied social, urban, and rural movements. So we need to have also rural movements that push for the grand policy that we need in agriculture, okay? To return the way of agriculture was before pandemic. It's not an option. So we cannot return. But, you know, as experience, it's like nobody wants to talk about pandemic anymore. We pass and we'll return to the same. No, we need to wake up and say, okay, we need to do something. And so we need to active involved in turning local farm into vital assets for providing food and promoting autonomy. So we need to participate and consolidate healthy agroecological territories. So a final question is this one that we can discuss if you want, but will the COVID-19 crisis provide the impetus to change industrial agriculture for a transition toward agroecologically based food system? If we understand that it was the root cause of the problem. Now, the global supply chains are in this area, in the opportunity to strengthen local regional food hubs to prepare for looming emergencies such as climate change and more pandemic. Are we ready to change or not? Are we ready to commit these alliances or not? Do you think that is possible or not? Because it seems to me that everybody forgot about the pandemic. But we have other problems, climate change, for example. We have poverty. So more and more, we have more people that are coming and living in the shanty town near the cities. That probably immigrants, probably farm workers, probably people that don't have the opportunities. And I want to finish this topic, with this video that is from Brazil, from the MST. I don't know if you're familiar with the MST. The MST, the landless peasant movement in Brazil. They are more than, they are in all the states in Brazil. They are taking the land, the size of Belgium in Brazil. So, for example, if the government are not wanting to keep the land, they are going to take the land and they stay there. But it's not that they are going to take a land that you are producing. Your name? Alessandro. Alessandro has a farm. He has 10 hectares, and he's producing the 10 hectares. That is what about this kind of farm. But if Francesco has 10,000 hectares and he's using only 2,000, so the rest they are going to take a land and they are forced the government to do a agrarian reform. This is what the MST is doing. If they land, the biggest land is very well organized. They have lawyers, they have schools, they have all kinds of professionals. But people that didn't have land and now they are very organized, they are producing in different countries, they have markets, they have. So we study a lot of this social movement because we need to learn from them. Not to do taking the land, no. All the comprehensive and holistic approach that they have. And during the pandemic, they were very keen to feed, especially poor people. So I want to show this video because it's very, very nice.
É tempo sem sol. Tempo de guerra. Tempo sem sol. Sem sol. Sem sol. Sem dó. Sem sol. Sem sol. Sem dó. Tempo sem sol requer tempo de solidariedade. É uma solidariedade das pessoas que tem um limite de suas taxas de no melhor âmbito de suas campanhas publicitárias, os parâmetros de uma ação manipuladora. A solidariedade que praticamos é a mesma que anos atrás, nos tempos da lona preta, alimentou o nosso corpo sedento, desnutrido, desabrigado e a nossa alma rebelde, em luta e em marcha. A solidariedade que praticamos e vivenciamos é aquele exercida por povos que se reconhecem. É a solidariedade de classe, que enxerga o outro do espelho, e tempos remotos e tempos presentes daqueles que lutam. É a solidariedade que busca atender as urgências daqueles que o capital insiste em descartar, mas que também alimenta os sonhos de um novo nascer do sol. É a solidariedade que se materializa na força combatida, o reconhecimento público do alimento estendido pela mão do trabalho, fruto da terra libertada pela mão. Para outra mão, o trabalho, ferida de morte pela exploração e pelo descarte. Nos encontramos na solidariedade, como este ato de responsabilidade política, que hoje compartilhamos, mas que amanhã compartilhará em luta no chão das ruas, das praças e dos palácios. Para mostrar aos opressores de plantão que ser solidário não é darmos aquilo que nos sobra, mas compartilharmos aquilo que temos, mesmo que pouco, como nos ensinou um povo em revolução. Ser solidário e termos a certeza de que o sol que nos ilumina a produção do alimento e nos aquece a alma com a natureza. É o mesmo sol que um dia iluminará o mundo. Povo que novamente marcha como um furioso mar em luta, em busca dos necessários tempos sem guerra.
Okay, this is just an example of what they did during the pandemic. They were giving away the food. And as they were saying, no one, because the idea is to give what I left, what I have the most, is also something that we give and share. And I think this example is very strong example that farmers are very solidary with them, especially during crisis. And so I wanted to show that because it's kind of ended up with all the topics that we say about agriculture in times of COVID, and all these experiences are agricultural. But I mean, even they have schools, universities, or the MST where they teach agriculture. Okay, so I wanted to continue. I don't know. I think we can continue with the urban agriculture because it's more or less the same topic that I just presented 2 slides. And shall we continue with this slide? Yeah. Okay, please do this for Professor Derek with this particular talk. And
There are some questions about this topic.
do you think that people forgot about COVID now? Yeah. And what happened here during the COVID? Everything was slow. Any of you started the garden during the COVID? Oh, okay. Yes. But here in Italy, but when you are in the train, you observe a lot of gardens, like a piece of garden near the rest it's like a community garden, right? Yes. And it continued, with the pandemic, it was slow, but no. The same.
Probably also and work less difficult in the state law.
Oh, okay.
Because we were close at home and, yeah, but there's some.
Even you couldn't go to the, no? I spent the pandemic in my farm, so I was in fine.
But for example, there's the example that you did that you did. I was thinking that, for example, I was in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands in 2019, and over there, for example, there were a lot of farm gardens, community gardens, where the people, and in the downtown where the people go there, they do not have, it's just like a yard.
Yeah.
Where they can cultivate, for example, vegetables, or I saw cherries as well, and apples. And in order to, to close the people to the environment, to agriculture, to organic agriculture, it depends, because it's integrated or organic agriculture. But the other point is that the people can realize what is farming. And moreover, they told me that it is very important, for example, for the social aspect, because many people over there, we were discussing this morning, they are alone. And so this was a kind of window
To socialize
themselves. And I was discussing about it with a friend of mine that is living in Germany. And in this city, the municipality gives these yards to the person in order to go there and to do the same. And I think that this very it is becoming pretty common, this kind of community gardens. And they are very important for many aspects that you have highlighted during your speech.
Yeah, in Berkeley, at least, very common that people have that the city gives land to the people that want to farm. So we create these community gardens. Or now, young people, when students of Miguel, two students of Miguel, now have a business that if you want a garden, in your house, or even new buildings that they are having. I don't know if you have the opportunity to visit the green buildings. So in the top, they have a beautiful garden for the people who live in these buildings. Now it's a business for many people.
I don't know if you know that also here in Reggio Emilia, there is on a terrace on the roof, there is two guys that are growing grapes, and they are producing in the just in front of the La Chiara, the church Chiara, and they are producing wine, and they are doing business in this way here in Reggio Emilia. Yes.
But this is different than vertical gardening.
Yeah.
So now there is a plain vertical garden, and they are producing vegetables in buildings. And they are using a lot of light, they are using a lot of water, they are using hydroponics that is a lot full of synthetic fertilizers. Totally. Anyway, let's see the example of urban agriculture.
Okay, just a second that I have to. So for this topic, we have done so we can.
So this is a topic that is huge. I'm going to just mention important things about the state of urban agriculture. Why? Because by the 2050, the year 2050, we are going to have more people in the cities than in the countryside. This is expecting projected rural and urban. The problem with rural is that many people are migrating to the cities or to the continents, the Africans to Asia, to Europe, and the South American moving to United States. And so we have a huge problem. So more or less, we are going to have 60% of the population is expected to be in the urban areas by the 2050, compared with the urban. And the other thing that we have in the urban problem is that young people don't want to be farmers. So the average age is 65 years old. And in Japan, 80 years old. So only the old people are in the rural areas. And this is the reason why they are developing the technology to harness robots to do everything for them. They are very old. And so in 1 century, the urban population expanded from 50% to the total of 50%. In 2010, 20 cities in the world with population more than 10 million to 37 million. This information already passed, but it is expected that 30 cities, the population will exceed 10 million. So it's very common in Mexico City is 22 million. Brazil, 25 million. Sao Paulo is very big in Brazil. And Bogota, the capital of my country, they have 12 million. So all this, especially in the global south, the big cities. Europe is different, but I think Rome, how many people live in Rome? 4 million? 5 million? 3 million? By the 2030, some thirds of the world's people will live in cities. The world population will rise 9 million by the year 2050. Okay. So in order to satisfy the food needs of urban population, a city needs to import 6 tons of food every day. that you need at least that this food is coming from outside. It takes like 1 kilometer, 1,000 kilometers to arrive to the city. 6 tons every day, and this food is over 1,000 kilometers. So what happened? You know, when we have the pandemic, when we have an earthquake, for example, in different places where we have this kind of situation. In the case of Japan, when it was a huge earthquake, many people didn't have food for these conditions. So we need to think about the food miles. I don't know if it's a concept that you have discussed in this master, but transport may account for 10 to 20% of the total energy, create a lot of emissions associated with the provision of giving food and each item. Average supermarket food item travels 1,500 miles, like 2,000 kilometers from the source that they bring into the supermarket. Okay, so the food mile represents petroleum used by airplane, trucks, and refrigerators. This is the food chain that was brought during the pandemic. So the distance and speed that has traveled, the carbon that was burned to get into the destiny, the damage to our planet for climate change account for a lot of emissions. We were talking about climate change. This is another part of the equation of the emissions. And for example, this is here in Europe. So for example, the orange that are coming from California have to travel 5,000 miles to arrive here. The bananas from here, from the Caribbean, has to 4,000 miles. The beef that are coming from Argentina, 7,000 miles. The cocoa beans from Central Africa, 3,000 miles. And tomatoes from the southern Spain to the north part of Europe, to be, let's say, England, had to travel 1,000 miles. So when you have your salad, so you need to see where the tomatoes are coming from. So this is the well-traveled salad. So where the lettuce is coming, where the cucumber is coming, the feta cheese, the olives, the onion, the tomatoes, okay. So everybody wants all the produce year round, but we don't know where the food is coming. Okay, and the concept that these salads is discussing in the environment. Different when you know that the farmer nearby are the ones who are producing the lettuce, the tomatoes, close. For that reason, the local food system is so important. And also the sources of greenhouse gas emissions from the US in food choices. For example, many people have meat choices that meat produce 30% of the green gases emission, methane mainly, but from cows. Okay? It's something that I always emphasize because it's not the same. Milk, dairy, or cheeses, 18%. So you account for this, it's like 48% cows. And all these fast food, 25%. And less with vegetables and cereals, cuts. So the other thing that is important is about the relationship between urban population and poverty, because we have many people in these big cities, especially in the global south. We have the poorest of the poor living in Chinatowns. Okay, very, very poor. By the 2025 next year, it's predicted that about 75% of the urban dwellers will be found in developing countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Why? Because they are having displaced, because they cannot compete Due to globalization, big companies are moving to the global south, so farmers cannot compete with these big farmers. So they ended up in the cities, in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa, or migrating to the north. And there are so many anti-immigrant policies in Europe and in the United States, creating a wall without understanding the root causes of migration. So the root causes, most of these people that are migrating were farmers. We're farming in our countries. And now they are in shanty towns that they are poor, they cannot eat well, and they cannot find jobs. So it's like a circle of poverty. So next year, 85% of the poor in Latin America, about 40 to 45 in Africa and Asia. So they have low income of this urban resident. And the other thing that is important, at least in Latin America, I don't have the statistics in Europe, but in Latin America, people spend 40 to 50% of their budget on food. In the United States, people spend only 12% of their budget on food. Okay, so it is something that we need to understand because the salaries are very low in our countries, and despite the fact they have to spend more money on food. So producing their own food to solve the problem. And so that we have food insecurity, 20% of underprivileged people live in cities. 180 million are hungry people. In the United States, a rich country, we have 50 million people that are food insecure. And in Europe,